Hello everyone. Today we are discussing word of mouth marketing with Christel Wintels. This is going to be a great episode that you're going to get immense value from, so let's get started.
You're listening to the Merged Marketing Podcast with David Louch and Jason Hunt. This is a show all about unlocking the marketing tactics and secrets behind everyday brands. Each week, we'll bring you expert commentary so that you can make better choices when it comes to growing your business. Thank you for spending time with us. Now let the show begin.
Okay, well, I think this is every episode's exciting, but this one here, we really kind of, we go down some really cool rabbit holes in regards to networking and word of mouth marketing. And we don't just scratch the surface, but we actually really dive in to some of those tactics that people can deploy the next time they go to a networking event.
Yeah.
We really differentiate the salesperson versus the networker.
Yeah.
And we go down that rabbit hole. So I think this episode, you're going to get a lot of value from. Make sure you tune in for the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, for me, this was a super interesting episode. I am currently a member of BNI. That's not what the episode was all about, to push BNI, but it was more a conversation about word of mouth marketing or networking. You know, as a business owner, as a salesperson, entrepreneur, whatever it is that you are going to have to network in some capacity to meet people, to make sales, to grow your business, to learn new things. And networking is a really great way to do that. And if you know how to do it effectively, you're going to be very, very successul. And BNI is just one of the ways that you can do that. So Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I really have an understanding now on why BNI is a good fit for you and not a good fit for me.
Yeah.
My approach to BNI, as a salesperson, by default, was very much transactional, where yours is more about building that relationship, which is key. And we get into that in this episode. I don't want to give any more hints. Let's just kick it to the episode.
Just get right into it. And hey, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast.
Do it.
Hello, everyone. Today, Jason and I are excited for yet another episode of the Merged Marketing Podcast. Our guest this week is Christel Wintels. He is the franchise owner and executive director of BNI Golden Horseshoe. Christel has spoken and written numerous articles about business networking and building a lifetime of referrals through the philosophy of giver's gain. She has received outstanding achievement awards from BNI, both nationally and internationally, including Director of the Year in 2009. Christel's mission is to eliminate cold calling by helping business people create a lifelong referral network. Christel, welcome to our show.
Thank you, David. Glad to be here.
Perfect. Well, Christel, before we dive into word of mouth marketing and how business professionals can generate more lifelong referrals, I would love for you to just give our audience a brief background of how you got into BNI as a franchise owner and executive director, and just maybe as far back as you'd like to go, but just a little history of how you got to where you are today.
As far back that I like to go, well, I was born on a farm. No, I'm kidding. So funnily enough, and it might be funnily enough, I actually come from a marketing background. So I worked at a traditional advertising agency when I started my career many years ago, and worked as an account representative. So worked with a number of consumer goods products, a number of vertical products, and I was also a media buyer planner. So I was always involved in kind of the marketing and advertising world. I made the audacious decision back in many years ago to start my own boutique advertising agency, and as a result was looking for opportunities to be introduced to the kind of clients I was looking for. And as much as I had all kinds of marketing and advertising knowledge, I didn't really know how to network. But people always tell you when you're a business person or a business owner that you really have to build your network. And I never really understood what that meant. So I started going off to networking events, and I'm talking in excess of 20 years ago, started going off to networking events and thought, okay, I can go and meet people. I can talk to people. And so I found that wasn't as fulfilling as I had hoped it would be. I didn't really know how or what to say to people. And so I started to hear about different kinds of networks. And one of the ones I heard about was BNI. So Business Network International is what it stands for. And it's a referral network. So you actually participate to get introduced to people who have the potential to become clients for you. And I liked that because it was a structured approach. So went to my first BNI meeting, saw how the structure ran, and decided pretty much on the spot for me that it was going to be a good alignment with the way I wanted to build my business. And it's not the only marketing tool, but it was one of the marketing tools that I wanted to include in my arsenal, if you will. Then had the opportunity after I joined a chapter, I became involved a little bit of the management of the chapter. Also had the opportunity to become involved helping out with the franchise at that time, which was in Toronto. And then a number of years ago, the franchise that we currently own became available for sale. And that's when I knew that BNI was going to likely be the career for me, because I liked the specific marketing approach that BNI chose.
Okay, interesting. So you actually used to own. You mentioned a boutique advertising agency. So
I did.
You owned an agency similar, probably to the one that we have, maybe a little bit different in terms of the service you offered back then. But
Yep.
You joined the BNI chapter as an owner of that agency.
I did.
Okay. So what sort of what led you out of that?
Out of the agency business?
The agency business.
So I had the opportunity. One of my really big clients at the time was a sponsorship event, and that probably generated about 70% of my business when I owned the small agency. And when that sponsorship industry, let me think of the diplomatic way or the politically correct way to talk about this. So it was a cigarette company that sponsored a very large event every year. And then, of course, it became illegal for cigarette companies to sponsor events, right? And so all of a sudden, poof, I lose a significant part of my income. So that's when I started to go and look for other opportunities. And the interesting thing was I got that piece of business originally because a friend of mine was connected with the cigarette company, was one of the brand managers, right? So that's where I got the opportunity to pitch, and we won the business. So I thought to myself, okay, so if I could leverage my relationship in there, it made sense that if I had more people connected to the kind of business I was looking for, that would work for me. And it did for my advertising company at the time, but I liked the approach of BNI better than it aligned with me more, like from a core value perspective, it aligned with me more than being just another advertising agency. And so for me, the decision was quite easy because I just simply liked the marketing approach of BNI better.
Right.
What was it about that marketing approach that really made you want to hone in on it? Like talking specifics to the day in and day out activities that would be entailed in that.
Well, so with the BNI model, you really are building relationships one-to-one with people. And the challenge for me at that time was in the advertising world, the people you're dealing with change at any given time. Right? Brand managers changed all the time. Account managers changed all the time. So even if you built a high trust relationship with one brand manager, if that person left or got promoted or changed businesses, all of a sudden you're back to square one, rebuilding that level of trust with a new brand manager.
It's interesting because it's almost like, you start a relationship with somebody and you really get along well with them. And that's kind of the goal when you start that relationship, is you want a never-ending relationship. So, if you're in that sort of agency world, it's almost inevitable at some point that relationship is going to cease. But that's not the case with like BNI.
Yeah, so what I liked about BNI is the structure to build the relationship is always in place. So when you become like a member of one of the chapters, you work to build trusted relationships, right? So that you teach them how to talk about your business, you learn how to talk about their business. Even if that membership changes, there's other members in the chapter that you continue to build those relationships with. New members might come in, then you're building new relationships. Existing members might leave for whatever reason, like happily, some of them retire and sell their businesses, but you always have that ongoing level of one-to-one relationships that you're continuing to build. And that was the part of the process that I liked the best.
Perfect. So, I guess moving into the questions now, that we know a little bit more about your background. I appreciate you sharing that, Christel, by the way. Can we define BNI as word of mouth marketing, or is it more referral marketing?
I think it ties into both. So our end game in BNI is always to generate high quality referrals for our members. So for example, if I have done business with you and your company, and then I refer you to one of my close contacts, typically when I refer you, it's either because one of my close contacts has a need or I've talked so highly about you that they're like, hey, what has this person been able to do for you? And could that help my business? And so that's the word of mouth part of it. You're just talking to people. You're talking to the people you know, but with some intent, right? So I think the word of mouth leads to the referrals.
Of course. And so, just doing some basic research and being involved in obviously BNI as well, I've identified the value of this form of marketing in terms of word of mouth. But do you have any, I guess, stats on the weight that people place on recommendations from friends and family, or from people that they at least know somewhat personally, and why that might be important?
Okay, so I'm going to get out on a limb here because I don't have exact BNI stats, but I know that I have seen statistics that will talk about the transfer of trust when someone is looking to do business with someone else. And I believe the stat, and I'll have to check this after the podcast, I believe the stat that I read is if somebody is looking for a product or service, like say my mom calls me and says, or your mom calls you and says, you know what, we need a plumber. Do you know a plumber? If I recommend a plumber to my mother because I have that close a relationship, it is 85% likely that she will use that plumber. Right? Because it's a transfer of trust and she knows me, she trusts me, she knows I'm not going to give her somebody that's not done either great work for me or I know to do great work. So when you have that high level of trust, that transfer of trust virtually promises that the business will turn into a lucrative, profitable relationship.
Yeah. From a sales perspective, and I mean, David has obviously been pretty engaged in the BNI community. Myself, not so much, but I will tell you, when a BNI lead does come through to my desk, it's not a hard sell at all. It's never a hard sell because you do have the relationship and trust that's you've already kind of gotten through the weeds of that. Whereas somebody, even if it's an inbound lead that fills in the contact form on our website, there's a certain level and degree and time that I need to invest to build up that trust. So it's almost like a fast forward past those sort of trust steps of a relationship, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that David mentioned in my introduction was I want to eliminate cold calling. I honestly believe that every successful client relationship that you want to have for your business is probably only a couple of introductions away if you're asking and talking to the right people. Right? And when somebody edifies you to that prospect before you even get in contact with them, like your job's halfway done. All you have to do is actually mess up the sale because the foundation's already been laid for you.
Yeah. So Dave, there you go. You just took away some credit for your sales there now.
Yeah.
It's your referral team, Dave. They're just laying all the groundwork for you.
Exactly. And you know what? You still have to be a good closer. So
of course you do.
Always be closing.
So
all I can do is open up the opportunity for you, David. It's up to you to close it.
Yep.
So, Christel, it begs the question, like, in terms of would you say this type of, word of mouth referral or the BNI is a good fit for everybody, or is it a specific type of person that you find that attracts themselves to BNI?
Well, I'm going to answer that question incredibly, I hope, politically correctly.
Mm-hmm.
There are different types of behavioral styles out there. Everybody's different. In my opinion, BNI is not for everyone. And for me, I've been doing this I'm in my 24th year with BNI. My understanding, what I've come to understand, is some individuals prefer to be more transactional in their relationships. They don't really have any desire or necessity to build a deeper relationship. It might be the type of product or service they offer. It might be their own behavioral style. They just don't need to or want to. So if transactional is sort of the behavioral level where you're comfortable, then BNI is probably not going to make a whole lot of sense for you because it's relational. You're building relationships with people, and those relationships will last as long as you serve the relationships. So any salesperson who is relational in nature, any person who is building their own patient base, their own client base, and building a longer term relationship is what interests them with their clients as well as referral partners, then it's a good fit. It's where if it's entirely transactional, like on to the next, it's probably not as good a fit.
David's kind of laughing, smiling, and pointing at me while you're talking because naturally, my default. This is why David is a better fit than I would be because I naturally do look at things as very transactional. I'm not necessarily proud of that. It's nor do I give any excuses for it aside from there's only so many hours in a day.
No, exactly. And I don't think there needs to be excuses. And that's why I wanted to be careful the way I said it, because when I say those words, people view transactional as a negative. That's just the way people are. It's not positive. It's not negative. It's just a fact.
Transactional people might work really well with transactional people.
Totally. Transactional people are way better, in my opinion, to manage things like call centers and helplines because they stay very even-keeled, very fact-based, and that's exactly what's needed in those situations, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting when we initially started with BNI. That was you do need to deploy patience because
yes, you do.
It does take time, and I get it. It takes time to build up your trust and credibility before somebody wants to refer your business, right? So it totally makes sense, and 100% agree with what you're saying, Christel. It definitely is that type of personality type that values relationships and relationship building. They make a really good fit for this type of a system.
And while we're on the topic of, what the question Jason had was who's really a good fit for this type of marketing and this type of sales, I'm not sure if he meant to imply this, but I'm also curious because I've been in BNI for a couple of years now, and for the most part been in the same group with the same individuals, and for the most part the type of businesses that they own or the size of organization that they have stays pretty consistent. So is there a point where an organization like BNI does not work for certain companies that might be the size of, let's say, I don't know, Coca-Cola or just like a large company with hundreds of people? Because at that point, you're not getting the business owners, and at the end of the day, that's how BNI is marketed. Is you have to be a business owner, and it's not always the case. You get people coming in that are sales managers, and sometimes they do really, really well, but you're not getting the business owner at that point. So, what's your thought on that?
So rather than business owners, the sort of terminology that I like is an entrepreneur. Because you can still be an entrepreneur and work for another company. It's an intrapreneur, I know, but you still have that entrepreneurial spirit. You run your own processes. You're responsible for your own schedule. You still have an entrepreneurial spirit, yet you work for somebody else. So I think that, yes, a great alignment for BNI is entrepreneurs. But here's what's interesting in an organization that's coming up to its 35th anniversary. As a matter of fact, this year, BNI is 35 years globally. So we're starting to find that people who started with us 15, 20 years ago are now going from the primary rainmaker role or the sales role, they then expanded and hired salespeople, and now they ran the sales team for a while. Now they're like CEO of a company that's got 10 salespeople, right? And so what happens in that period of time when they're moving into management and they're moving into visionary positions, we probably aren't aligned with them. But then what they've started to do, which I found, I thought this was a great evolution, is they are making it part of their salespeople's responsibility, because that's the kind of salesperson that they want to recruit for their particular businesses, are relational salespeople. So it's evolved kind of generationally.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean, as a business grows. So it can support those businesses. If they're moving entirely into management and have no responsibility for building the client base at all anymore, then you're right. It's probably not the best fit for them, because we are a growth marketing company.
I will say that. I will say even when you do have clients that come in from a referral, and something to be said for the fact of the longevity and the length of leash that you can get with those clients because of the nature that they come into your business. There is that relationship aspect, and I know I keep preaching that, but that is kind of one of the benefits that we see.
But it is true, and all of the research that's been done on referred business is that it will last much, much longer and tend to be of higher value.
Yeah.
So speaking of all this, word of mouth sort of marketing and referral marketing, maybe you can touch on, Christel, some things that haven't worked for you in the past in terms of marketing. I know you come from an agency background, but maybe some specific methods of marketing come to mind that have kind of went pear-shaped. Maybe you can shed some light on some things that didn't work.
Seriously? You seriously want me to tell you about my mistakes?
Yeah, it's not your mistakes. Yeah. Hey, your mistake is what led you to being what you are today, right? Like, I like mistakes. I personally don't mind them as long as I'm learning from it. It's when I make a mistake twice when I'm going to kick myself.
But also, I think, how you've advertised your company or your business, if at all, would be interesting as well. Because the Golden Horseshoe and Niagara region of BNI, just for the listeners, is not a small organization. There's a lot of chapters, so there's a lot of members. Christel has built it to something pretty impressive. So, how does that happen? And I think I know what you're going to say, but have you advertised in the past?
I have. So, when I became part of BNI, I, of course, came from a traditional advertising and marketing background. It's like, talk to me about frequency, talk to me about readership, talk to me about eyeballs, talk to me about all that stuff. And I thought to myself, okay, well, so we should just advertise it. And I remember that the BNI director that I worked with at the time said to me, well, we are advertising it. And I said, what are you talking about? I don't see a media buy here. I don't see, what? He said, well, it's word of mouth advertising. Yeah. And I remember kind of wrinkling my brow. Seriously, I was a member for like 6 months, wrinkling my brows thinking, word of mouth advertising. And then all of a sudden I thought, of course. Because if we can't build our own business through word of mouth, it kind of sends the message that it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's true.
Right? And so I thought to myself, oh, right. And so we are one of the few organizations that actually directly rely on our clients to build our business. But here's the part I love about it. They might be building my business for a number of members, and granted, I'm going to make revenue on that. But the value of every single referral partner they bring in as a member is going to mean tens of thousands of dollars of business to their own businesses. So it's a win-win across the board. So that being said, I have run advertising. I've done some online advertising as recently as 2 years ago. I did some print advertising when I first took over this region or bought this region in the early 2000s. And BNI is one of those stories that is incredibly difficult to tell in a medium that has a short opportunity to explain the message. Yeah. The best way to have people see the value of BNI is to attend a BNI meeting. That's where you get to meet David. You get to see what his relationships are like in his chapter. You get to see what the chapter does for each other, and you get to decide whether or not you fit. And so far, we haven't found any magical way to represent that in the media that are available to us currently. It's like trying to get a haircut over the phone.
Yeah,
100%. Because you've been in it 24 years, right?
Yeah.
So obviously a lot has changed in the digital landscape in that amount of time. In terms of any sort of experience that you've had potentially with Facebook or some of the other social media platforms that have emerged over time, because I'm just thinking aloud here, but Facebook groups is a great opportunity to kind of take those in-person relationships and take them online.
Yeah. And it's funny as you talk about that. I remember it was probably about 10 years ago when the online kind of networking that was available online started to really get some traction, right? LinkedIn started to get some traction. Facebook, was getting more traction, and people looked at us and said, you know what, BNI is going to be obsolete in 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, why is BNI going to be obsolete? Because people can do all of this online, right? And it's not untrue that they can't meet online. People can meet online. You and I are having this conversation online, right? But as long as human beings are human beings, they still want the interaction. And what we found in the 10 years since those, broad statements of BNI is going to become obsolete is the soft skills that our members develop in BNI isn't taught anywhere. Nope. And that support is still needed by any human being on this planet that does business with other human beings.
Yeah. You know what? It's interesting. You can easily meet somebody, talk, tell stories, and you'll have an experience from that meeting. When you go online and you're in a group and you have a bit of back and forth and that same type of dialogue, but you're never going to remember that conversation you have with somebody in a Facebook group.
Right. And human beings are storytellers.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what we remember about each other. And we remember the emotions we felt, and we remember the things that we thought about. And those soft skills, what's interesting with our millennial and even younger members is that the more screen time that they are comfortable spending, the less interpersonal time. And you still have to do business with people.
Yeah.
So you still have to learn those interpersonal skills. You have to learn how to kind of read somebody. You have to learn to understand what they're saying behind the words. All of those things that good business professionals learn over time. Mm-hmm. And there's fewer and fewer opportunities to do that. So in my opinion, BNI is going to be around as long as human beings are working with other human beings.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I know for me, I've developed a lot of those skills since I've started as well that, I wouldn't necessarily have as quickly as maybe I have, like simple things like presentation skills, how to pitch your business, just things like that you can do online, but it's not the same. So that's perfect.
I think there might be an opportunity there. I mean, anytime you can take those opportunities to have those face-to-face experiences, but taking and using online as a way to complement those
100%. And online should support it 100%. I mean, we encourage all of our members to have an online presence. Like, are you active on Facebook? Are you active on LinkedIn? Does your website represent you exactly the ways you want to be represented? Because as soon as we refer you to somebody, they're going to Google you.
Yeah, 100%.
So make sure what shows up there is going to support what we've said about you.
Yeah. Taking it a step further, when you go to have those weekly meetings with other people a part of the BNI, taking a selfie with that person, posting it on social media, tagging their business, them tagging your business, and now your entire audience is now aware of the business. So there's opportunities like that as well, right?
Right, and you're not selling, and that's what all the great social media consultants say is don't sell, just tell stories, interact with people, build a conversation.
Yep.
Don't get on the social media platforms to sell.
And to your point about that, ultimately provide value. So, online through social media, providing value might be literally giving away something for free to someone that is going to help them grow their business. Whereas in BNI, providing value to a member or to somebody is giving them a referral, which ultimately leads to closed business, which is ultimately the philosophy of BNI, which is giver's gain, because that's going to come back to you.
Yep. And And if we use our social media platforms to highlight some of the people in our network, right? That's again sharing something of value, but you're edifying someone else.
Yeah.
And you're not talking about yourself. You're not talking about what your product and service is. You're talking about this great person in your network. So again, I think that those levels of conversation just build the credibility for both parties.
Yeah.
And now a word from our sponsors.
This week's episode is brought to you by FreshCrowd. FreshCrowd is a full-service social media agency in Canada that specializes in everything social, from management to community building and advertising. FreshCrowd can help your business attract a fresh crowd of people. Visit freshcrowd.com to find out more.
Perfect. Well, this has been an amazing conversation so far. We've really, kept it high level in terms of discussing what word of mouth marketing is, what referral marketing is, how you got started in BNI, and what BNI is all about. But now I kind of want to transition into more of the nitty gritty tactics and things that the business owners and marketers can actually take away from this episode, because one thing is certain, there is a lot of content out there right now about how to be an effective networker and interact with people, because as more people take their business, take their lives online, we lose a lot of those skills that you mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So for you, what distinguishes a great networker from a poor one?
I, in my opinion, think that there is one characteristic that separates a master networker from somebody who's just out there trying to network, and that is the ability to actively listen.
Yeah, and it's so funny that you say that. I didn't anticipate you saying that, but I was recently having a conversation with somebody about, to be honest, this podcast. And because we're still relatively new, and we're on our 11th episode now, or 10th episode now, and what it's taught me is the importance of active listening, and how, for the most part, in our daily life, in our daily work life, with the way things are now, you don't necessarily have to truly practice active listening.
Nope.
And then now being in this situation, like, that's all it is. And
yeah.
You don't listen, you're not going to pick up on things. You're not going to be able to dive deep into conversations. You're not going to be able to provide value to your audience. So, that's interesting.
And I once read this great quote that has resonated with me since I read it. Most people listen to respond rather than listen to learn.
Yeah.
And so when you're listening to respond, all you're doing is thinking about what you're going to say without truly hearing what the person is saying to you.
Yeah, and you know what? That is true. I've heard that before, and I'll admit I do that sometimes. And I don't know. I don't know if you have any advice or tactics on how to stop doing that, because ultimately I think it comes from a place of, I don't want to look ill prepared, or I don't want to look like I don't know something. So I want to anticipate what this person's going to say so that I can sound professional, or I can sound legitimate, or whatever it might be. But I do struggle with that sometimes. So what are your thoughts? Yeah.
So, and me too. I'm no different than anybody else. I struggle with it as well. And I know when I'm doing it because I'm tuning out from what they're saying. So I actually will, my own voice in my own head will say, stop it and listen to what they say. Mm-hmm. Just listen, right? Now, we can always ask questions that will lead to whatever we want to share with somebody, right? But if we truly listen, when we're at a networking event, right? When you ask someone what they do and they explain it to you in such a way that you have no idea what they've just said to you, there are subsequent questions that you can ask that will help you try to understand. Like, some people will answer questions like, well, what do you do? What business are you in? Oh, it's a marketing company. Yeah. So does that tell you what they do? Yeah. No. I mean, anybody can go. BNI is a marketing company.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right? So can you tell me what platform? Marketing company. What kind of clients do you have? What's the number one value proposition you have for your clients? So when you get those questions out there, then you will hear answers that typically will be able to allow you to share what it is you would like to share. But really, there might not be anything to share until you've asked enough questions to learn whether or not, number one, you can help this person in some way, whether or not they're even looking for any kind of input from you. And some people, let's face it, sadly, just really want to hear themselves talk. Mm-hmm. That's the hardest part for me in networking. That took me a long time to learn.
What's interesting is I speak quite frequently, and I'm sure you guys can relate when you do your BNI presentations. But at least for myself, the way I speak when I'm presenting is much different than when I'm speaking in a group of 3 people.
Yeah.
I speak quicker. I talk faster. I want to make sure I've got to get my point across in those small conversations. But when I'm up on a stage, I'm taking my time. I'm more animated because I know no one's going to interrupt me. And it's almost like you need to take that approach when you have those one-on-one conversations as if you're sitting there watching a presentation.
Yeah, because there's no time limit on the information that you might want to share. And I mean, like the art of conversation is like 2 ways, right? So if somebody, I found in networking, if somebody's talking at me all the time, they're typically trying to sell me something.
Mm-hmm.
And so they don't know me well enough to be selling me anything yet because they don't even know if I have a need for what they're selling.
The best way to sell is to just shut up.
Yes. To ask a couple of questions and let people answer.
Yeah, because usually my approach to selling is typically having them tell me the story, and I'm sitting there absorbing it, and I'm trying to be a doctor, and I'm going to be either prescribing a solution or I'm going to have that missing piece to their puzzle.
Yeah.
That's how.
But first, you have to hear that they need a missing piece, right? Like that's the part of it. And the challenge with a lot of networking events is business people will go there because they think, okay, I need to build my business. I'm going to a networking event. So do you have the expectation that you're actually going to sell something at a networking event? And most people, if they're honest, will say at some point, yes, they do.
Yeah.
Well, nobody's gone to that networking event to buy anything.
Yeah.
Right? They're not shopping. No. They've gone because they want to sell something too. Yeah. And that's when business people will typically walk away from networking and say, it doesn't work. It's a waste of my time. Well, the expectation was skewed. If you walked into a networking event and said to yourself, my goal is to meet 3 people that I want to have a next meeting with, what would your networking efforts look like then?
Yeah, definitely. So,
right?
Okay.
They'd look completely different.
They would. They're dramatically different. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've all experienced that in certain organizations.
Yep.
And again, there are benefits to those organizations. It does allow you to meet a lot of new people and potentially take those relationships to another level and meet up again. But yeah, for the most part, you're going there to sell, and so are they. So you're not going to create relationships.
And everybody's going to go home disappointed. Exactly. So my mission in life is to have every networking event feel like it's a value for every business person, and it's an easy way to do that. I'm looking to meet 3 people that I want to have a next conversation with. And when you go in with that kind of opportunity mentality, you could end up talking about anything. You could finally meet that personal trainer. This is a personal thing for me. Meet that personal trainer that's going to inspire me to actually start exercising regularly. That would be huge for me. Right? But I wouldn't have necessarily gone to that networking event thinking I'm looking for a personal trainer. I'm just open to the opportunity of meeting 3 people that I want to have a next conversation with, whatever that conversation is.
That applies to networking events. That can apply to trade shows. When you're
absolutely.
Hustle and bustle, and you're just trying to track down anybody and get them to go to your booth and pitch them, and absolutely, it's like we used to preach activity generates sales, but you end up wasting a lot of time and a lot of energy to try to get that low volume of sale. I'm all with you there, Christel. It's more about the quality than the quantity.
It is, and it has to be focused activity. I think the more mature we get as a salesperson, it has to be focused activity.
Yeah. Okay, so now that we know, just moving into the last question here, now that we know what distinguishes a great networker from a poor one, which is ultimately active listening listening, as Crystal identified, what are some proven networking strategies that you can share with our audience? What I want to have happen here is I want our audience to be able to walk away with one or two things that they can actually implement when they either go to a networking event next, or they're meeting someone at a coffee shop, or they're introduced to somebody. What can they say? What are good questions? What sort of strategies can you share? One or two would be great.
So there was once the founder of BNI, whose name is Ivan Meisner. He does a podcast called BNI Pod at bnipodcast.com, and he does one, I don't know, regularly once a week. And one of the podcasts that Ivan did years and years ago are the 10 Commandments of Networking a Mixer.
Okay.
And those 10 commandments are what they have just become habit for me whenever I go to a mixer. So the first thing I decide before I go to any kind of networking event is, who do I want to meet? Specifically, if I'm looking to fill gaps in my own network. So let's say, for example, I don't know, I'm somebody in a marketing company who owns a marketing company, and it would benefit me to know some people who do marketing things, but not my area of expertise, right? So maybe copywriters, people who are content creators, maybe that would benefit me to know for my own business. So I always try to think of three different kind of areas. Somebody who I might be able to use as a vendor, who might I might be able to leverage a relationship with them that's going to be mutually beneficial for the both of us. The second one I think about is somebody who might be working with the clients that I'd like to be working with. Right? So I try to, in my mind, think about who that might be. Who might be serving my ideal client? And could I meet a person like that? And I might define it by business category, probably by business category, whatever business industry they're in. And then the third one is just an interesting conversation. Just somebody, like, again, I might be interested, as I said, in increasing my personal fitness level, and just an interesting conversation about that. So I've found that when I kind of leverage those three things, somebody who can help me, somebody who can help my clients, or is connected to future clients, and somebody who's an interesting conversation for me, I've never left a networking event disappointed.
Wow. Okay.
What's interesting here, I mean, we've touched on this a few times, we talked about, the perfect fit for the BNI or for these type of networking events. It's anybody can do this with the right preparation prior to going to, because the default, for, let's say, the salesperson that we talked about earlier on, the default for them is numbers, bottom line, and sell. But, taking this approach is it's a no-brainer. Like, if you just have this prior kind of preconceived notion going into that event and have this kind of checklist, it's going to make the experience probably a more fruitful one.
Well, absolutely. And you're going to meet some really interesting people. Right? Because you've changed your expectation. Then the challenges with going to a business networking event with sell mode, there isn't anybody there in buy mode.
Yeah.
Right? And so you're just going to be disappointed from the get-go. So if I could wave my magic wand and every business person would go to a networking event saying, you know what, I'm just looking for people to build my own network. No one would ever leave a networking event disappointed.
Nope. You're right. Well, that's great advice. And just to recap, Crystal's advice, when you go to a networking event, think of these three things. Who can help you? So a vendor, who is your ideal client currently working with, and just to have an interesting conversation. So those are great strategies. Thank you very much. We really appreciate you being on the podcast with us today, Christel. I know for me, I've seen firsthand how building relationships with other business professionals and owners by helping them grow their own business comes back and pays dividends over and over. So thank you again.
My pleasure.
For those that are listening today, who would like to learn more about anything that you said today or get in contact with you, what's the best way to do so?
Email is always easy to get in touch with me. It's Christel at bnigh.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm also on Facebook. So any of the social media platforms. And David, they can always find me through you.
Yeah, of course. Perfect. That is great. So we would also like to hear from you as well. So please feel free to reach out to us at Merge Media. Our website is merge.ca, or you can email us at podcast@merge.ca. And if you're ever interested in checking out BNI, please reach out to me directly. I'd happy to have you out to a chapter, mine or another one that works best for you. So Christel, we have one final question that we ask every single one of our guests when they come on, and that is. Yeah, it's a good one. And I actually have a pretty good idea of who you're going to say, but we'll see if it pans out. So if you could choose one person, dead or alive, to represent your brand, who would it be and why?
Seriously? One person to represent my brand?
Yeah.
Just one.
Just one, dead or alive.
And I could ask this person to be my brand spokesperson?
Yep.
And you think you know who it's going to be?
I do. I'm writing it down right now.
Are you? I think I'm going to surprise you. I would choose Queen Elizabeth II.
Oh, wow. Dave.
Why Queen Elizabeth? Love to know.
Did you pick Ivan Meisner?
No, I didn't. But I picked the next close second, Richard Branson. I thought you were going to say him for sure.
Now, I didn't go there. I mean, I think Richard Branson is a great guy. Not that I know him at all. I'll share with you why. Did you ask me why Queen Elizabeth?
Yeah, why the Queen?
Because I think that we are seeing one of the last of the type of characteristic of someone who, at the age of 25, makes a vow and lives it for the rest of her life.
Wow.
I vow to serve the people of my country all the days of my life.
That's awesome. I mean, at first when you say Queen, I'm like, that's weird, but that makes perfect sense. And you can put some pretty awesome marketing slogans with that campaign as well, I bet.
Yeah.
That is powerful. That is powerful. Mic drop right there. I think.
Mic drop.
I thought I'd surprise you.
Yeah, so that is a great way to end it. So thank you so much again, Christel. We really appreciate being on.
A pleasure.